Hello, and welcome back to this episode of She Who Leads in Love. Today we get to talk about listening and how powerful listening can be in being seen. But first, let's dive into some fun things. One of the things I'm loving right now, I'm finishing up with some of my personal training clients, and one of the women asked me, "Hey, do you want to go out for coffee?" It was just so fun, and we had a lot of fun training together, and we went for coffee this morning, just learning a little bit about each other, and I love uncovering these parallels that everything has felt just so aligned, and it's really fun because you know how sometimes when you're an adult, it's a little more challenging to make friends because this has been my experience anyways. It's just a little more challenging to find new friends when you're in a new place or new town. And this has just felt very aligned and very natural. And when we're talking about our lives, and she was so beautifully expressing these things about who she is and how she loves to be. And she was saying things like, she's a band teacher and musician. And she's like, I just love being a little like the dork of the class. And I just really owning it, and how her journey of stepping into that, it just got me so excited to be connected with this completely different person and also completely the same. And so that is what I'm loving, of just the spontaneous uncovering of the coincidences and the parallels that life will show you when you're listening. No, that was not planned, but that did work out just perfect. One of the other super random things that I am loving right now is, those when you're vacuuming your car, and I've just discovered they have these like air guns that you can shoot air into like all the little creases and cracks. And I was doing that this morning, getting my car ready for my road trip, and I was loving it. I am one of those people that loves vacuuming too. So anyways, some just little fun stuff. So this episode was inspired by an experience that I had in my relationship just the other day. And then Katie and I did a podcast kind of on a different subject, and I wanted to take it a little further. And I tell the whole story there. If you want to go listen to it, it's the Awaken Your Truth podcast. And the episode is When You Think You're Speaking Your Truth. And so after we recorded that, I just felt really inspired because we touched on the power of listening and what that means. And it reminded me of this book that I read a year or so ago. It was called You're Not Listening by Kate Murphy. The idea is that almost like in the world, it's kind of an epidemic of loneliness and isolation. And it's actually that people have lost the ability to truly listen to one another. So we're so much more connected, with social media and messaging, but few people really feel they have anyone who really listens to them in a deep way. And I see this come through with clients all the time within the desire to feel seen. I would love to just explore this, how being seen is really this sense of having someone else listen to us, like really truly listen with presence. And that if that's something we're wanting, to reflect and ask, are we listening? Are we being in the energy and being the kind of person that we want to be? So some interesting things that came out of this book, You're Not Listening. If we think about that, the average person speaks 120 to 150 words per minute, but we can think at a rate of up to 1,000 words per minute. Think about that, guys. That's so many. When we're thinking, that's just crazy fast. But the speech to thought gap or differential, this means our minds are only really partially occupied when we're listening to someone else talk. And we use this extra mental capacity to think about what we want to say next. Right? How many of us, do this, catch myself doing this all the time, is I'm listening to someone and then I realize 10 seconds in, oh, I'm having a conversation in my own head, or I'm like thinking about something completely different in my own head. Or this is the biggest thing I think we do is we're listening and they might say one thing and then we're planning what we're going to say to that thing. We're planning what we're going to say back. And that is our brain, like filling up that differential because it's thinking so faster than what we're listening to or what we're speaking, what the other person is expressing. So to learn to listen is really actually this skill we have to develop with our self-awareness in order to catch that mind and that functioning of the brain and bring it back so we can really fully listen. And for the purpose and intention of having deeply connected relationships, like those relationships that we're seeking where we feel seen, that requires us to listen. That requires another person to really truly listen to us and us to listen to another person. So one of the things that Kate Murphy talks about is how this phenomenon of the more you think you know about a topic or about a person, the less you actually are listening to them, because this is that part of your brain that already knows. It's operating in, I already know, so I don't have to listen. And as I'm saying this, I'm almost reflecting as I'm wondering if the longer we're in a relationship with someone, the more we think we know about them. And if we're feeling less and less seen, that somehow this is a part of it, because our brain is filling in the gaps of all of our assumptions, everything we think we know, which also reminds me of one of my favorite quotes around when you're in a long-term loving relationship, or this could be friendship, partnership, it's re-meeting the same person over and over and over again. And our willingness to let someone be new, this all ties together, right? Our willingness to not take who they have been into the present moment conversation and actually listen is going to allow greater depth, greater connection, and feeling seen, and giving them that most wonderful feeling of feeling seen. And when I was telling my story the other day, part of this story was about a conversation I was having with Lee, and he had said something, and I thought I was speaking my truth and speaking up, and it kind of created some conflict between us. And when I reflected back, I realized how I was operating from, I actually had like a reaction, like a fear response to what he was saying, and that came out. And then when I was exploring this further and going back and looking at what was in this book, You're Not Listening, some of the neuroscience studies explained this so perfectly. So when our beliefs are challenged, brain activity resembles a fear response. Okay, so when, say we're actively listening to someone and somebody says an opposing view, like they have something you don't agree with, that's why it feels difficult, because it literally activates the same neural pathways as being threatened. So this is so interesting and makes so much sense. Like as we're on this path of learning to lead in love and practicing releasing any of those fears or conditionings that we've learned to protect ourselves, or like when we bring in this perspective of this false identity of the ego, when we kind of turn off and we're not listening, we're actually strengthening that ego identity. We're protecting that identity by not listening. Or it actually feels like it's the other way around. The impulse or the habit of protecting our ego identity is causing us to not listen. So the reason we stop listening or we're trained to stop listening isn't necessarily like a laziness. It's more of a habit we learned to protect our ego. We're just defending this identity and this story we've built, and we don't even know we're doing it. So I love this awareness of being or opening to being a better listener as a way to practice shifting out of the ego perspective and more into the present moment, because you're going to have to release that grip on the ego in order to truly listen, right? True listening requires you to be willing to not know, right? To not have an answer, to be wrong. So this is actually a freedom practice, because if you think about it, the tighter we hold on to that identity and everything we think we already know, we're not expanding. We're just keeping ourselves in what we already know. Okay, now here's another really interesting quote that I came back to from the book is Kate said, to really listen is to be moved physically, chemically, emotionally, and intellectually by another person's narrative. So really think about that. If you are to let yourself be moved by another person's narrative. Now, I can instantly recognize in me the resistance that comes up in I don't want to be changed by them. Like there's something that I don't want to be affected by what somebody else is saying. And this is protection. This is that idea that something outside of me, something somebody else is saying is going to affect me or influence me in a way that I don't get to choose or I don't have control over. And so this idea of really listening could be quite vulnerable for someone when you think, if I really listen to them and I let myself be moved by what they're saying, how is that me kind of staying in my power? And I think that's one way to look at it. But I think the key here is that your connection to your truth and your connection to the love that you are, for all of us, it's the core. It's the underlying steadiness. And when we're connected to that, it's what allows us to be moved in our human experience. And so that's what gives us the foundation and the steadiness and the capacity to be able to listen. And like I was talking about a couple of weeks ago, to be able to feel. And so it's just so interesting how the mind plays these tricks that if I really listen, if I let myself be moved, I will somehow lose myself, or I'll somehow lose connection, or I'll somehow not be safe. When that's just that tricky mind. And the opposite is true. The more I listen and practice listening, the more present I am and the more I'm operating from my state of true connection, human connection, the more I am in my power, the more I am connected to the love that I am. And when we're talking about this connection, this actually happens at an energetic level. So some more neuroscience for you here. They did a study where subjects listened to someone telling a story during an MRI scan, and he found that the greater overlap between the speaker's brain activity and the listener's brain activity, the better communication and understanding. Okay, so good listeners, like when you're listening and you're letting yourself be moved by what they're saying, your brain waves literally sync up with the other person. When you feel seen, this is what's happening on that energetic level, is you are matching frequencies. Your brain waves are synced. But But if we start thinking halfway through someone's sentences, now we start to use a different part of our brain and there's no coherence or resonance there. So you can really see how this experience of being seen or seeing another person is so connected to really, truly, deeply listening. It activates a different part of your brain. And I think this is something that naturally happens as we become more and more present and more connected with our heart space and leading in love is when we get to this place where we're in alignment with our truth and we know who we are and we feel a sense of safety and there's no need to perform or prove or explain or justify. Like when we are in our truth, it's so much easier to listen because of this exact thing we're talking about. There's nothing to protect. And so this can be a great tool to bring into your relationships, whatever they are, for your own personal expansion, as well as if you're wanting to experience greater connection in your relationships and you really want to feel seen more. I mean, it brings me back to that. I don't know who said this, but we have two ears and one mouth and use them proportionately. And so, I mean, it really makes sense. And every time I get really intentional about listening and practicing this in my own relationships, the connection just feels so much deeper and more satisfying and more fulfilling. And I am certainly not a master of this yet. There's always opportunities, just like the story I told the other day on the Awaken Your Truth podcast. I didn't even realize I was responding from this place of protection. And as soon as I was triggered, I stopped listening and I, needed to say something from that place of like, hold on a second. What you're saying isn't, it's, creating this sense of threat in my brain and in my body. And I need to stand up and I need to make sure I'm saying this out loud. And to be able to listen truly, it means bringing an awareness to anything, any way we are still trying to protect ourselves. And it's always so much fun when you are actually listening because you learn so many things you didn't know. And I'm laughing at this, but truly in the moments I can catch my ego come in and see it wanting to be right or prove a point or trying to think, and I can bring it back down to remind myself, just listen, like let yourself be moved by this person's experience. I always feel expanded. There's perspectives, there's understandings that I thought I knew that I didn't. And this is such a beautiful way to develop, especially in your most important relationships, to develop that sense of being seen, to make that choice and drop out of your ego and really truly listen to someone is allowing them to be seen. That's intimacy and that's freedom. And this is the pathway to really deepening that connection with you and with them. Because the more we drop out of our ego, the more we drop into our truth, which is where all the magic and all the fun is. So if you want to start practicing this and even bring this into your next conversation, this greater intention to listen and just see what that feels like. And if you catch yourself asking, okay, what do I want to say next? Or what am I going to say next? You catch yourself thinking, one of the questions you can bring to your mind is, why are they telling me this? Like, what's underneath it? And that's going to allow you to drop into this place of curiosity that I don't know what they're saying. And what is it? Like, what is it they're trying to really communicate with me? And it's interesting because shifting into this place of you being curious about what someone is saying, it requires you to be in your truth. It requires you to be connected to this safe place within you. Okay, so let's bring this all together by coming back to this idea that if I'm someone who's wanting to feel greater connection in my relationships, or I'm wanting to really feel seen by my partner, the way you can be in your power is to become the person who sees. And one of the most powerful ways to do that is by practicing truly listening. When you listen, when you really listen, you stop needing the other person to perform for you. You stop needing them to be a certain way in order for you to see them or experience what they are communicating with you. You really truly hear them, you meet them, and you stay in your power, in your connection to your truth, because truly you can only experience true listening from a place of your own connection and your own safety and your own truth. So I hope some of this conversation has inspired you to open up to whatever your next experience of listening is, because it really truly is. I've received it and I've given it, and it is such a more true and real connection with another person. So that's all for this week. Happy listening. And remember, you are a powerful creator and you have always got this. I'll see you next week.